Number 8. Courtney Clenney. An OnlyFans model was arrested in Hawaii for the murder of her boyfriend in April of 2022. Christian Obumseli, a 27-year-old man who worked in cryptocurrency, was found with deep stab wounds in his Miami, Florida apartment. When authorities arrived, his model girlfriend, 26-year-old Courtney Clenney, was found covered in blood. At first, she claimed that she had acted in self-defense and that Obumseli had attacked her first, but evidence quickly surfaced that proved otherwise. On the evening of April 3rd, Miami police responded to the luxury apartment after receiving reports of a domestic violence incident involving a stabbing. When they entered the apartment, Clenney was cradling Obumseli in her arms as he was bleeding profusely from a knife wound. He was rushed to a nearby hospital, but sadly he later passed away from his injuries. When an autopsy was performed on the man, the county medical examiner determined the cause of death to be from forceful downward thrust of a blade cut 3 inches into his chest. Apparently, the couple had experienced issues since they started their relationship in November of 2020. On the day of the crime, Obumseli had just arrived at the apartment after getting food for the two of them. Clenney had been speaking with her mother on the phone, who later said she could hear them fighting with each other on the call. The woman accused her boyfriend of lying about something, and that's when things got physical. Initially, Clenney wasn't charged with the crime and she continued with her life like normal. However, when authorities came to the conclusion that the woman committed the murder without justification, they put a warrant out for her arrest. Possibly trying to avoid her punishment, Clenney was later apprehended in Hawaii at a rehab facility for alleged post-traumatic stress disorder and substance abuse issues. The model is currently awaiting sentencing for the murder of Christian Obumseli, and her trial has been set for December 19th, 2020. Number 7. LILIA SUDAKOVA. A Vogue model from Russia was apprehended for the murder of her husband in 2020 after he allegedly flirted with another woman in front of her. Sergei Popov was 28 years old and was married to 27-year-old LILIA SUDAKOVA for 4 years when the incident took place. Apparently, the couple was going through a rough patch in their relationship and neither of them were happy. Even though LILIA was at a high point in her career and was the face of a popular Russian clothing brand, her marriage was falling apart and she blamed her husband. Sergei was supposedly a computer genius and an attractive man too, but he was also an alcoholic and an arrogant snob. LILIA claimed that she was the victim of domestic violence and that Sergei had kicked her and grabbed her by the hair on multiple occasions. The night before the murder, LILIA claimed that she refused to sleep with her husband, and that led to him bringing home another woman from the bar the next day. LILIA was absolutely furious and claimed that Sergei even drunkenly asked her to cook for the two of them, which only added fuel to the fire. Her husband was blatantly flirting with this woman right in front of her, and something within her snapped. She went into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and then forcibly stabbed the man in his heart. After coming to her senses, LILIA called an ambulance and Sergei was taken to the hospital but did not survive. She was immediately put under arrest and charged with manslaughter and still awaits trial today. If found guilty, LILIA could face up to 15 years behind bars for her crime. Number 6. Harry UZOKA. A man that once modeled for brands like Mercedes and Dior was brutally killed in England in January of 2018. 25-year-old Harry UZOKA was found stabbed to death in the streets of London. The man was represented by Premier Model Management and had a promising career for himself in the industry. UZOKA was known as a good person and was described as a pleasure to work with by the prestigious brands he'd modeled for in the past. George Coe, who was also a model, was charged in connection to the crime along with his friends Jonathan Okabigo and Mercy DeConde. UZOKA and Coe's relationship started out friendly, but quickly deteriorated. Coe apparently claimed to have slept with UZOKA's girlfriend, which sparked an exchange of angry text messages between them. The two of them arranged to meet up for a fight in Shepherd's Bush, but when Coe showed up with Okabigo and DeConde, things rapidly escalated from fight to murder. All three of the men armed themselves with knives prior to the altercation, and Coe was left defenseless as he was expecting nothing more than a fistfight. UZOKA was completely outnumbered and then was stabbed by Coe, but it's unclear if Okabigo and DeConde also took part in the attack. Regardless, the men showed up with intent to do harm to UZOKA, and they were all charged for the crime. In the end, George Coe was given a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years. Mercy DeConde was given 22 years in jail, and Jonathan Okigbo was sentenced to 14 years behind bars for manslaughter. Number 5. Jodi Arias. In June of 2008, a man was killed in his Mesa, Arizona home at the hands of his stalker ex-girlfriend. Travis Alexander met Jodi Arias in Las Vegas, Nevada at a business convention in 2006. The pair became quick friends and eventually started to date in November of that year. The relationship became fairly serious, and Arias was even baptized in the Mormon faith, the religion Alexander belonged to. After dating for several months, the couple broke up during the summer of 2007, and Alexander began to see other people. However, the man would later reveal to his friends that he believed Arias was stalking him. Oddly enough, the two continued to communicate with one another even after Arias moved to California. Then, on June 4th, 2008, Alexander was found dead in the shower at his home with a slit throat, a gunshot wound to the face, and 27 stab wounds. His body was discovered by his friends, who had grown concerned for the man's well-being after he missed an important conference call for his job. When they reported the incident to police, they immediately named Arias as a possible murder suspect since Alexander thought she had been stalking him. At the scene of the crime, authorities recovered several incriminating images from a digital camera that were time-stamped from the day of the crime. The photos revealed that Alexander and Arias were together that day, and one of the pictures showed a bleeding person, but their face wasn't featured. A bloody handprint in one of the hallways of the home was tested by investigators and proved to be a mixture of Arias' and Alexander's DNA, definitively placing the woman at the scene around the same time her ex-boyfriend was murdered. In July of that year, Arias was charged with first-degree murder, but it wasn't until May of 2013 that she was found guilty of the crime. Later in 2005, the woman was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the brutal slaying of Travis Alexander. And now for number 4. But first, it's shout-out time. We want to give a huge shout-out to John Rowe for watching and supporting this channel. We love your feedback. If you're new to Bad Badger, be sure to subscribe and join the family. Number 4, Darlene Gentry. In Robinson, Texas, a high school prom queen turned murderer shot her husband in the head as he slept in their bed in 2005. 31-year-old Darlene Gentry made a 911 call at around 6:15 in the morning on November 9th, 2005. While speaking with the operator, she claimed to have woken up to find the home's back door wide open, her husband's gun cabinet empty, and her husband, 31-year-old Keith Gentry, covered in blood. When police and paramedics arrived at the scene, the man was rushed to the hospital with a gunshot wound to the head, barely clinging to life. Keith was placed on life support, but later pronounced brain dead by medical professionals. Darlene was voted prom queen in her high school and later met Keith while attending Texas State Technical College. The pair rekindled their romance after breaking up for a short time and eventually got married in 1999. Keith worked as an electrical engineer while Darlene became a nurse. The couple went on to start a family, and Darlene gave birth to 3 sons. From the outside, their life seemed perfect, but they were actually riddled with debt due to the woman's out-of-control spending problem. They constantly fought about their money struggles, but Keith seemed determined to keep their family together. Darlene, on the other hand, had other plans. When the former prom queen was questioned by police, she was adamant that someone had broken into their home, but oddly, there were no signs of forced entry. Investigators found that Keith's gun case had been unlocked with a key, and all of the guns that were removed were discovered neatly stacked on the front lawn. Only a .22 caliber revolver was missing from the collection, the murder weapon. Evidence began to pile up, and police started to suspect that Darlene was responsible for her husband's murder. Adding to their suspicions, the woman didn't ask about Keith's condition one time while she was being interviewed by the authorities. Darlene was also a nurse and didn't try to administer medical aid while her husband bled from the gunshot wound. A motive soon became clear when they discovered that Keith had a $750,000 life insurance policy, and Darlene killed her husband in order to fuel her shopping habit. In 2007, Darlene Gentry was found guilty of murder and was sentenced to 60 years behind bars for the crime. Number 3, Renato SEABRA. A Portuguese underwear model was found guilty of murdering his 65-year-old lover at a hotel in New York in 2011. Renato SEABRA struggled with his sexuality his whole life, but he seemed to have come to terms with who he was when he started modeling. At some point, he began to have a relationship with an older man named Carlos Castro, a fashion journalist. It's unclear if the two of them were officially together, but they acted romantically and often traveled with one another. On the night of the crime, Castro and SEABRA were in New York City so they could spend New Year's Eve in Times Square and see Broadway shows. However, later that night, Castro was found bludgeoned to death and castrated in their hotel room. A friend of the pair, Luis Perez, reported that there was some tension between the men on the trip for jealousy reasons. When SEABRA appeared in the lobby, he apparently told Perez that Carlos will never leave the hotel again, which is when they found the deceased body of a man. During his trial, SEABRA tried to plead not guilty for reasons of insanity, but it didn't stick. The 23-year-old was later convicted of the murder in 2011 and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for the crime. Number 2, ESTIBALIZ CARRANZA. In 2008, a woman went on a murder spree in Vienna, Austria when her lover and husband failed to impregnate her. ESTIBALIZ Carranza has since been nicknamed the Ice Cream Killer. The woman owned an ice cream parlor in Vienna and almost got away with her crimes by storing her victims' dismembered body parts in tubs intended to store the dessert she served. She then filled the buckets with concrete, stashed them in her store's basement, and hung air fresheners to hide the smell of decaying flesh. However, a year after the second murder, workers discovered the tubs as they were renovating the building and reported their findings to the police. ESTIBALIZ later revealed that she killed her husband Holger Holz as well as her lover Manfred Hinterberger after they had not been able to give her a child. She shot both men to death and then chopped up their bodies using a chainsaw. She was desperate for a baby, and it apparently drove her insane. In a twisted turn of events, she found out she was pregnant the same morning she was arrested. In 2012, ESTIBALIZ was sentenced to life in prison the same year she gave birth to her son. The baby was quickly taken away to live with the father, one of the woman's new lovers, and shockingly, the man ended up marrying her while she was incarcerated. Number 1. Amanda Hilberling. In 2011, a man fell to death after crashing through a window on the 25th story of his Tulsa apartment building, with his wife accused of pushing him. 25-year-old Amanda Hilberling was found guilty of second-degree murder in 2013. On the night of the crime, the woman was 7 months pregnant with her husband Josh Hilberling's child. The couple had supposedly been fighting, and she claimed she didn't mean for her husband to fall through the window when she pushed him away from her. She claimed she acted in self-defense and that Josh had always been abusive towards her. Amanda recalled multiple instances where Josh had purposely broken her phone so she couldn't speak with anyone while he wasn't home. But she repeated multiple times on the show that she loved her husband very much and said it wasn't plausible that she murdered him. Amanda blamed the unconventional shape of the window as the true cause of the accident. However, in the documentary called Women Who Kill, she says 2 of them were fighting that night because Josh had started doing drugs and wanted to start selling them. She confessed that she was angry and disappointed in his decision, but maintained throughout her trial that she didn't intentionally kill him. In the end, she confessed to shoving Josh, which ultimately resulted in his death, and she was consequently sentenced to 25 years in prison. Would you still go out with an extremely attractive woman if she had violent tendencies? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Bad Badger.